Welcome to Causing the Effect, a podcast focused on the exploration of your mind, body, and spirit.
Tracy Pleschourt, how you doing, ma'am? What's going on? How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, Scott. It's
Of
so good to be here.
course. It is about time. Me and Tracy have been trying to make this happen too many times. I've been sick for 2 weeks, everybody, so I apologize for the delay in episodes. I apologize for just the nasally, but it's all good. We're going to rip it through. Tracy, I've been excited to talk to you. You were an advertising executive for 2 decades. You have been created, self-made you. You stopped overeating, over drinking, created a multi 6-figure business, all this cool stuff. While being healthy and wellness, all this stuff, where would you say was like that critical point in the journey for you to say, not only A, this is what I'm going to do, and B, this is how I'm going to do it?
Yeah. I would say after it felt like I had been beating my head against the wall, I felt like no matter what problem I was trying to solve or what goal I was chasing after, it felt so hard and so out of my control. I'm somebody that I would consider myself a little bit of an overachiever. So I would kind of white knuckle my way through it, will my way there, but it never felt very comfortable. I never felt very equipped. I would just kind of claw and grind my way through it. So I would say that as I got older, I kept thinking, there's got to be a better way. And when I was in advertising, a big part of my responsibility was mentoring, like finding the right talent to bring into the agency and then mentoring them. And I loved that. I really loved drawing strengths out of people and figuring out like where they could fit in to make their biggest and best contribution. And so when I decided to leave the world of advertising, I knew for sure I was going to start some sort of consultancy or coaching program where I could influence people and help them really tap into their strengths and like better understand how to have an awareness of what it is that they're thinking and how that's leading to their experience. Because before, when I was beating my head against the wall, I had no idea that I alone was creating that experience that felt like I was constantly beating my head against the wall. I used to think that it was just very unfair circumstances, and that's not true. It's the fact that I was believing that they were unfair circumstances, which led me to feel like, I was defeated before I even began, or I was ill-equipped, or, I was in an unfair, like it just never felt quite, I never felt confident. And so I had to learn how to create kind of a system to operate from that shifted all of that. And so I started Self-Made You, where I literally teach people how to operate their life so that they can solve any problem and achieve any goal. And I tend to be kind of a slow learner. I really like to operate from systems, from frameworks. So I have a framework that I teach everybody. And once people feel confident and equipped, it's amazing what they create with their life.
And that was the 2 important things you said there when you were struggling was thinking issues and feeling issues, thoughts, emotions. That's everybody's issue. And I started realizing that like right when I got divorced, like it's not your issue with people, it's your feelings about people, it's your emotions, how you feel towards people. And the system is mind math. Is that what it is?
Yep.
Go ahead. I've been waiting for months to talk about this with Tracy. I love this system. I forgot half of it, but give everybody the explanation and the breakdown. I had like a 40-minute digestion system where Tracy gave me everything and like a bullet point, but do your best, Tracy. I'll let you have it.
Yeah, so I like to have frameworks to teach with, because I think that especially people who are very visual, it's just an easier way to learn. It's more of like an applied learning style. And so I created what I call mind math, and it's basically you get to see how your brain, which part of your brain you're functioning from. If you're functioning from the primitive part of your brain, it's going to be very fear-based thoughts that you react from, versus the other side of your brain, which I like to call your prodigy brain. It's very intentional. You're actually intentionally choosing a thought and feeling that you're responding from to create a result. So the reason why we call it mind math is because it comes out of your mind, it comes out of your brain, and it goes onto paper. So it makes it more tangible. It's something that you can see. So often the obstacles that stand in our way, you can't see them because they're thoughts and feelings. We can't see those. But when you can get that out of your brain and onto paper, and you look at it like it's math, oh, this plus this created this for me. Oh, now I see it. But without being able to see it, you can't change it. And so we put it into a math formula. And, math is very evidence-based. It's like 1 + 2 = 3. If you change one of those variables, you're going to get a different result. Same is true with our mind. If you change your thought or you change your feeling, you will definitely get a different experience, a different result. So I like to teach it in that way because it makes it more tangible. And then the operating system that I teach it's called the self-control operating system. So again, I'm all about acronyms. So SELF, the self, you have to understand yourself. The S is self-coaching. I like to use that mind math tool to self-coach. It's really just heightening your awareness, asking yourself questions like, how am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling that way? The answer to why I'm feeling this way is always what I'm thinking. And so again, you just use that mind math tool to make it more tangible. So that's what the S is, self-coaching. The E stands for eliminating obstacles. So I teach my clients how to eliminate the obstacles that they can see, as well as the obstacles that they cannot see. So to give you an example, if you're somebody who's trying to stop over drinking, your prodigy brain may not be strong enough for you to go to happy hour because you're having thoughts that are being driven by your primitive brain that are like, this isn't fair. Why don't I get a drink and have a good time? Everybody else gets to, right? So that's creating an urge that you might react to, and you might drink, and you're drinking kind of against your own will, which, arguably you're not getting the result that you want. So if your prodigy brain isn't strong enough, I would recommend, why don't we just eliminate that obstacle? Let's eliminate the happy hours that we are, invited to or attending for right now until we strengthen that prodigy brain. So that would be an example of eliminating something that you can see. I also teach you how to start eliminating things you can't see, like the saboteur narratives that are coming from your primitive brain. So if you are somebody who is, often feeling very judgy, either you're judging yourself or you're judging other people or you're judging circumstances, I teach you how to eliminate that kind of thinking. I teach how to not operate from that kind of thinking. So that's the E. The L is leveraging strengths. Now, all of us have strengths that reside within our prodigy brain, but most of us don't recognize either that we have them or how to tap into them. So empathy is a big one, especially for those people that really struggle with like judgment. What they need to tap into is empathy for themselves, empathy for other people, empathy for different circumstances. But there's also like this power of discovery, really being able to discover what else you could be thinking, what else you could be feeling about this circumstance. Innovation is another great strength to tap into. Navigation, learning how to navigate and really using your values, your personal values as guideposts. So those are the strengths, really leveraging the strengths that are already within you. And then the F stands for forging intentional results. No longer just kind of winging it, no longer seeing just what life has in store for you. It's like, no. We're going to manage our primitive and prodigy brain so that we get the results that we want, so that we overcome any problems that stand in our way, or we achieve all the goals that we've set out to achieve. So being very intentional versus just living life on autopilot. So that's the framework that I teach. And the mind math tool is part of the self-coaching. It's part of the S of that operating system.
Beautiful. No, I like that we're starting with awareness and you're ending with intentionality, because I feel like
Yep.
that's the biggest miss for most people. And that's kind of like, people say you live in the matrix and all this stuff, and this was getting the shot, that was all this stuff. How would you, or how, I guess, use that on a personal level? How did you become more aware? And take that first step to intent. That's really the first step in anything, right? Becoming aware, and then we'll move from there. Where did your awareness come from? Was it spirituality? Was it a tool you were using in your daily routine?
Yeah. So when I decided to leave corporate America, I was using a life coach to help me navigate my next steps. And the tools that she was teaching me really started to kind of hit home. And I noticed that I came to her with the desire to, have some guidance in this career path. And what I recognized was the tool of heightening my awareness, like really quieting my mind and really understanding what it is that I'm feeling at any given moment. That could be applied to every area of my life, not just my professional life. And then that really started to have a play on the relationships that I had in my life, my income earning abilities, my health and wellness. So it was really very unintended. And little did I know that I would end up creating an entire business around this. But I believe that, here I am, I'm 50 years old, and it took me the majority of my life to understand that awareness is everything. Without awareness, you just kind of live life on autopilot, on default. And that's fine if you want to just keep creating the same thing for yourself. But for those of us who really have set out to live more of a optimized life, that's not fine. Like, you have to have a level of awareness. So yeah, it took me, there's lots of tools, to heighten awareness, to really kind of quiet the mind. And I would say that those tools they're strengthening tools, and anything that you're trying to strengthen needs to have consistency. You need to practice it. This is not about just insight. Like, I do believe that the reason why my company is as successful as it is because we not only educate people, we create an environment for them to apply what it is that they're learning. So I would say change is 20% insight and knowledge, and it's 80% application. And that application is how you start to strengthen these skill sets. So, I by the grace of God was taught something, and then I kind of set out and went, okay, so I use alcohol as a way to numb my anxiety, and this isn't working for me so well. Like, I had all sorts of negative results in my life due to alcohol. I had to have a heightened sense of awareness around, why am I even turning to an outside substance? What is it that I can create for myself. Like, if I'm feeling anxious, how do I calm myself down? Through self-coaching, through asking myself questions. And so it really took me applying that heightened sense of awareness to all areas of my life to recognize it's the key to change right there. Like you said, it's awareness and it's being intentional.
And it's so interesting because I look at when you make that move, right? If you decide to get a coach, it's like you were playing a chess game a certain way. And then like you move the pawn, like a little pawn. This is why I always tell people, like, you got to try stuff because you never know, like moving that pawn changes quantifiably, could change the direction of your entire life. Like I felt the same way when I got a coach. And everyone listening, I love that Tracy didn't really give a meditation, or like pick your poison. There's so many different options. Some people like journaling, some people like manifesting, some people like meditation. You guys know me, I'm a meditator. Go just anything that calms your mind, like Tracy with my little cousins. Brooklyn kids, I can't call it meditating. I tell them just sit off the phone for 20 minutes when you wake up. The key is to be off the phone, be off of the input systems of the life where you can calm your mind down. And it's crazy, Tracy. Every day I do that. Everything else is easier. It's like a snowball. Like, and why wouldn't you want a calmer mind or to be more aware? And that's, I guess you were even using that other tool of innovation by using a coach and these other kind of things that you kind of see it forming even before you came up with it. You were kind of practicing it without even knowing it.
Right. Yeah. So I had evidence all around me that this works. And ways to quiet your mind. So I love meditation, but there's a time and there's a place. Like if I'm feeling really anxious and I'm noticing like I'm having a huge urge to, eat something or drink something, open up a bottle of wine to numb those feelings. Sometimes meditation isn't the best option because maybe you're surrounded by people or it's really loud or there isn't a quiet space to escape to. Quieting your mind is really shifting its focus, right? So in that experience where I'm feeling anxious, my mind is going 50 million miles an hour and it's hyper focused on a belief like this isn't fair, or I need this, or I can't be funny or courageous or smart without having that wine or having that glass of wine in my hand. Like that's a belief that I'm operating from. The goal is to shift your focus from that thought that is not serving you, because we know it's not serving you because it's creating an urge that very likely, if you're not strong enough, you're probably going to succumb to. So the objective is to shift your mind from that thought to something else. That's it. That's what the goal is. So when we talk about meditation, it's like quieting your mind. We're really trying to shift our mind to being very present, very quiet. So one of the techniques that I like to teach my clients that you can do anywhere at any time around anyone is to just put your index finger and your thumb together and rub them together with enough pressure that you can start to feel the ridges of your fingertips, like the actual, what we would call like fingerprints. Rub your fingers with enough pressure that you can actually feel those ridges.
Oh, that's interesting, Tracy.
Just notice that. And you have to be very laser focused to be able to feel those ridges. But it's so fascinating because as you do that, you are absolutely shifting your mind into a more intentional way of being, right? When you are being intentional, you're now tripping the trigger of your prodigy brain. You are no longer operating from your primitive brain that's very fear-based. We're now being very intentional because we're doing this and we're looking for those ridges.
That is That's
tension.
very cool, Tracy. Because that's like the issue I have with being a meditator and like being you're aware, right? But if you can't change it, then it's just fucking annoying. It's like I'm aware that I have this thought, and this Tracy, this is my issue with the drinking. I'm with you the whole way. I have not fixed it. I did this last month. I was like, oh, I'm not going to drink. Of course, I'll just go out with the guys and not drink. Anxiety. I'm not the cool Scott. Blah 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 blah. Next morning, you wake up, you're like, what happened last night? And then I was like, oh, all my issues come from drinking. Like just eliminate the obstacle, as Tracy would say. So we're going to become aware. Then these thoughts, I'm assuming we all have negative thoughts. These thoughts will come. It's being aware and saying to yourself, this is my fear-based primitive brain. I'm going to actively shift this to the prodigy brain.
Yes.
And for people that, we spoke about this a little bit on the podcast, like your primitive brain is no match for the prodigy brain. The primitive brain is about 20, 30 million more years evolved. So this is why people can't stop eating. This is why you go off those instincts.
Exactly.
So what we're going to do is switch the thought. Now, I like this. I'm using this because, I'm an anxious guy. Now, for the emotional side of this, we change the thought. Does the emotion change automatically by doing one of these techniques, or are you actively doing something emotionally as well?
Yeah. So you can, because you've now tripped the trigger of your prodigy brain, now you are in an intentional state. So now you can, with intention, ask yourself, how do I want to be feeling? Same circumstance. You don't have to change the circumstance. And that's where most human beings get it wrong. They think in order to change, they have to go out and change all of the things that they cannot control. People, the weather, the number on the scale. Like, of course you could lose weight and change the number on the scale, but the number on the scale at that very moment, there's nothing we can do about it, right? Like the day of the week, the holiday that is, on the horizon, we can't change any of that. But yet we somehow are confused and we think that we should be able to. And so that's where everybody starts to get very grippy and you start to feel the lack of control, because the reality of it is you don't have control over circumstances. What you do have control over is your thoughts, because your thoughts then change the way you feel. You'll never, ever have a feeling without having a thought first. Thoughts always trigger feelings. So if you are now doing this and getting real intentional, you're now focusing on finding those ridges. We're doing that with intention. We've now just tripped the trigger of our prodigy brain. Now we can start asking ourselves questions like, how do I want to feel under this circumstance? I'm not going to try to change the circumstance. So let's say you have a client who says, I quit. Okay. Client has said, I quit. You cannot change the fact that they've just said that. You can change how you are going to think about it. So if the client says, I quit, and you feel angry, notice why you're feeling angry. It's because you're having a thought. What's the thought? Is it, this isn't fair, right? Or they have now betrayed me? You can control that thought. And I'm not suggesting any sort of unwanted feeling needs to be changed. It doesn't. You always have a choice. You always get to ask yourself, what am I creating? How does this mind math unfold? What's the result? What's the equal sign of this circumstance? So if the client says, I quit, and you feel angry, you've got to know what is the thought that you're thinking, and you've got to know, how am I reacting to that? You get to decide if that's working for you or against you. Most of the time, if you're operating from a fear-based thought, you're going to be very reactive. So maybe you turn around and you yell at them, or you call them every name in the book, which probably does not create the result that you want. So you do have control. You can choose to think and feel anything you want about that circumstance. But just notice that I'm not suggesting that you change the circumstance, that the change happens at the level of your mind. It actually has nothing to do with the words that the person said to you. Does that make sense?
That makes quite a bit of sense. And I like that there's a little bit of Buddhism in there where you're controlling what you can control, dealing with impermanence, letting the things that you can't control kind of flow by. Because what is the point?
Yeah.
You're just wasting energy. Now,
Yeah.
if a person, let's go with the achievement of a goal or solving a problem, what is the most important step in a person trying to achieve the goal or the problem?
I would say the very first step is deciding, do you have a problem to solve or a goal to achieve? And the reason why I like to start there is because I want to see which part of the brain you're operating from. It's super important to me as a life coach to know which part of the brain you're operating from, not because I want to tell you that you're doing it wrong. It's because that's going to dictate the next step. Ultimately, we're going to get you to a place where you are feeling in control, but knowing if you think that you have a problem to solve or a goal to achieve, I know that you're either operating from your primitive brain or your prodigy brain, and that will determine what your next steps are. So here's an example. If there is, let's just say you weigh 200 pounds and you want to be weighing 180 pounds. If you say, I have a problem because I am 20 pounds overweight, then I know that you're thinking this is a problem, right? It's fear-based. Yeah. I know that that's coming from your primitive brain. I also know that I need to heighten your awareness around what's happening there. This does not mean you're broken. This just means that you are operating from your primitive brain. And most of the results when you're operating from your primitive brain are not sustainable. So especially when it comes to weight loss, I've got to make sure that the person understands kind of the neuroscience, basically, of the primitive and the prodigy brain. But if you were to say, I have a goal to lose 20 pounds, now I know you're operating from your prodigy brain, which is going to be way more open. It's going to be way more curious. It's going to probably be willing to try things and assess things. You're probably thinking, what do I not yet know that's going to get me to that result that I want, right? It sounds very different than that fear-based narrative that comes from your primitive brain. And again, I'm not suggesting that you're broken or you're wrong because you're coming from your primitive brain. I just need to know that because it will determine what the next steps are for you. So I would say deciding, do you have a problem to solve or a goal to achieve? That's the very first step because we want to know what part of your brain you're operating from. And then from there, I would teach the neuroscience of your brain, the 3 pounds that resides between your ears. I want you to understand that because when you understand that, you start to accept yourself. There's no longer this war like, oh my God, I can't believe I drank again last night after I said I wasn't going to drink. And because now what we're doing is we're like layering on all this guilt, unnecessary suffering and shame. Like, I want you, Scott, to understand why that actually happened so that you can separate yourself from that. And you can be like, that was a function of my primitive brain. Doesn't mean anything about me. Just means I'm not managing my mind. That's it. No problem. But without that wherewithal, you're not going to do that. You're going to shame yourself, right?
I've been doing it all month, Trace. I'm still upset about it. I was so hyped up because I was working prodigy brain, and the second I got put into it, And that's instincts, and that's, you have to kind of break the pattern and all that jazz. But the point, I like that you're starting from it's like, if you feel this way, then we're gonna go this path. If it's that way, I guess if the person's fixating on what is wrong with them regarding the matter, that's a primitive brain style. We're gonna shift them back to prodigy. So how are you gonna get them from primitive to prodigy?
Yeah. So we do teach some self-command techniques that help you shift. So they do look like meditation. They do look like thought downloads. They do look like the rubbing of your fingers together, deep breathing exercise, intense focus visually, through your other senses, hearing. So we've got a lot of techniques that will help you shift. I'll tell you what, probably the best technique is through prompts. Really starting to ask yourself, like, how is it that I'm feeling? Where am I feeling that in my body? What does that feel like? Because in order to answer those questions, you have to trip the trigger of your prodigy brain. So it's just kind of like this backdoor approach that I take to start tripping the trigger of your prodigy brain. So that's where I think the value of a coach comes in. But my objective is not to make you dependent on me. I want to teach you how to self-coach so that you don't need a life coach to always be in your back pocket. It's that you've got the skills, the SELF, you know how to self-coach, you know how to eliminate the obstacles, you know how to leverage those strengths, and you know how to forge intentional results, that you feel equipped. And now you're doing it all on your own. So yeah, we teach all those techniques.
Cool. And I will tell everybody, on the link below, we'll put selfmadeyou.com. The first thing that pops up is Tracy's self-assessment. Definitely check that out. It'll help you decide which brain you're working out of. Now, I'm going to take this a step back, because we're dealing with issues that people kind of know what the issue is. Let's say a person has more of this general, and I talk to a lot of young kids, and I feel like somebody who's a little older, you guys kind of have it more drawn out, what I want to do. But a person who says to themselves, I'm working the 9 to 5, it just doesn't feel enough to me, Tracy. I just don't know what I should be doing. I don't have the mission. I don't have the goal to help people like you. All this stuff. How do you have that issue with your clients? How do you guide somebody? And I know we're going to start with the awareness. How do you maneuver through that?
Yeah, I really focus on showing them where they're at right now. So I was actually just on a call with a client, and she's going through my student teacher program. So I believe that the world needs more life coaches, more people who understand the self-control operating system, who can go out there exponentially, like, spread the word that you do have control. You just don't know how to tap into it yet. So I was just explaining to her that when you're dealing with a client who is so convicted in a belief, like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, or it's never enough. Like, I hear that all the time. It's just never enough. I'm going. And I never get to, the finish line, right? I want them to see that belief right there, that is the insidious, like, thought error that we need to change, because that is, you're operating from a belief that came from your primitive brain, which, by the way, is almost never accurate. It's almost always a lie, because it's not true that it's never enough. And I can prove that to you, because I could take them through all the different areas of their life where I would be willing to bet my life that they have that exact same thinking. My financials are never enough. My relationships are never enough. My workouts are never enough, right? We could go on and on and on. They live from a belief that they don't even know they have, that sounds like it's not enough. And so, to answer your question, I spend time with them, showing them what's actually creating the result that they're experiencing. So we're looking at the mind math of their primitive brain, because they cannot argue with me that that's exactly what they're experiencing. So I always start with where they're at right now, because just like with any other GPS system, you got to know where you're at to be able to use
the
that
control
tool.
group. Yeah.
Yeah. You got to know where you're at right now in order to use that tool to get where you want to go. So we spend a lot of time talking about what created the experience that they're now having, because that's where the evidence is. Our brain wants evidence. So I'm going to prove it to them that this is what created the result that you're getting. And do you understand that? Once they understand that, then I'm willing to move on, and we can get real intentional, and we can start changing things very, very quickly. But they have to understand that neuroscience first. That's super, super important.
Yeah. Because that's very similar to what you said about the primitive brain, letting the person know that this is just the way it is. And that's almost what you're saying with because I think a lot of people that go to a coach, they're a perfectionist, they're type A, they're always going to have that issue of like, I want more, more, more. But you're just saying, listen, you're just kind of built this way. And I think that's giving me ease, because again, that's like that's an issue I have. It's like, oh, okay, it's just the way it sort of is.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we are going to get rid of your primitive brain. Here's what it looks like. It looks like we're turning down the volume of your primitive brain, and we're turning up the volume of your prodigy brain. Your primitive brain actually has a purpose. Like, it's what keeps you from walking in front of a bus. It's always scanning for danger. But the reality is we're not in a lot of danger, but yet it's constantly feeding us all of these fear-based thoughts, which turns into sabotage. So I want to really shine a light on that and show you how that's sabotaging your efforts. It has a purpose. Like when you put your hand on a hot stove, you want to feel the pain so that you pull it off. Same thing is true with those primitive brain fear-based thoughts. Don't walk in front of that bus because you might get hit. Right. Like, don't walk away from that cookie. You've got to eat that cookie because it might not be here tomorrow. That is a thought that you do not need to react from, because that's not even true. You could get a cookie any time of the day, anywhere, right? But yet it's that fear-based narrative that thinks it needs to keep us alive, but we're not in any danger. And so you just need to notice that's what's happening, and you can just kind of put it on the shelf. Like, we're not trying to get rid of it. It actually has a purpose, but most of the time it sabotages our efforts. So I teach you just to notice it and then shift to use the prodigy brain, which is already within you. You just got to know how to use it. And I would say that's half of it. And then having the awareness of when that primitive brain is showing up and not making it mean anything about you. You're not broken because it's offering you thoughts. It's supposed to be doing that. What we're not supposed to be doing is reacting from it.
Isn't it funny that most people just think there's something wrong with them? But that's kind of how we're built, this lack. Yeah. And, that's a whole philosophical conversation. But no, I really enjoy you're not like pounding the pavement with this stuff. You're like, listen, this is how it is. Very like from a objective standpoint, this is the situation. Everybody's this way. Take her to leave it. Shifting, the awareness and the shifting. I think those are such powerful tools that everyone could use, particularly like, I always get nervous with my generation and the social media and just, people being unconscious. And I think the next step of evolution of consciousness is us having to combat social media and being pulled in these different directions. And these are the techniques, like what you said about coaching. These are techniques that are going to be used for us to not, be depressed and anxious and this and that. Because like Tracy nailed all my issues this year. Drinking problem, anxiety, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just going to be like, okay. Just coming aware, like, but even that's giving me ease in this conversation. Like, yeah, it's just kind of the way it is. Like you are, triggered this way just to survive.
Yeah, you deploy that operating system, and I can promise you, it will relieve the unnecessary suffering that you're experiencing right now. It will. And I mean, that's like the tip of the iceberg. Then you can go on to like solve problems and achieve goals. But where my mission lies right now is relieving the unnecessary suffering that's going on in the world, because it's only happening because you think that you are broken. You think that because you are listening to those primitive brain narratives, that there's something wrong with you. And that's just not true.
And that's bringing it back to Buddhism. Like that's the I've had a couple enlightened guys, and everybody who's like, reaches that level is like, that's the difference between somebody who's enlightened and not. There's not a difference. It's just, you didn't know that there was nothing wrong with you. That was it. You were just unaware that, all right, it's just is. There's not an issue. There's not something wrong with you. It's
Right.
it's all good. But Tracy, thank you so much for joining me. This was super enlightening. And everyone, please check out selfmadeyou.com. I'll put that in the link below. Check out the assessment and reach out to Tracy, and we'll put our contact info too below. But Tracy, I like what you're doing here. You're really onto something. This is it's like a fine line between the neuroscience and ancient wisdom. It's very, very cool stuff. So I commend you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Cause and Effect, guys. Thank you so much. Leave a like, review, subscribe, all this stuff. You're hearing this in 2023. Hoping you guys are crushing it this year. That's it, people. As always, stay safe, stay positive, stay blessed. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.